Hello, Solar Racers. Today we are going to be going over how to do FEA on suspension components. So more complicated than the simple FEA we did last time, and I'm actually going to start with the theory behind it. So take the upright. If we want to FEA the upright, we need to know what kind of loadings are going to be occurring on different components and where it is fastened to the rest of the car. So here I have drawn a very simple free body diagram of the upright and a very simple free body diagram of the wheel and spindle assembly. And guys, this is pretty simplified, but just kind of bear with me. I pin the upright at the two A-arm connection points right here and right here. In the real model, that's right here and right here. Those pins are represented in blue circles. And the connection point between the upright and the spindle and wheel assembly is indicated by the green point. So that's right there in the real models and right there. Now, the case that I'm going to be going over today is as a cornering load, just a 1G cornering load, and that's going to be applied to the contact path of the wheel right here. So in our free body diagram, that force arrow appears right here. And from here on out, it's pretty much basic depth-bods analysis of what's going on. So here's my free body diagram of the upright and wheel and spindle separately, and I know that if my wheel is going to stay static, it's not going to accelerate, this force is going to apply a reaction force and a reaction moment right here. And then at this point, the connection point between the wheel and spindle assembly and the upright, whatever the reaction forces and moments are on the wheel and spindle assembly, I'm going to see opposite reaction forces and moments on the upright connection point. And that makes sense if we think about it. If I have a cornering load coming to the left on the wheel, I'm also going to experience that same cornering force on the upright connection point. The difference is that we also have this moment, and that moment is the force times the radius of the wheel, or the perpendicular distance between the force arrow and the connection point. So I'm going to zoom in on the upright now and just look at that, since that's what we're really focusing on for analysis. If I zoom in on that point, I have the upright represented here in the large black rectangle with the spindle hole right here in the middle. And I've added a dividing line right here and zoomed in on the moment and force. I've also labeled the depth or width or length of the upright L, the distance from here to here. And we know force is in units of newtons, and moment is in units of a force times a distance, or a newton meter. So we here at Solar Racing say that moment is represented actually as two bearing loads, one pointing up on this side on the left and one pointing down on the right side. And the reason for that is you can see that the left side of the arrow, if we were to make that into a force, because keep in mind, guys, a moment is a fictitious 1D load, but since nothing in real life is one-dimensional, we have to turn that into a real 3D coupling force for our analysis purposes in 3D. So if we look at how the moment load is applied, it's an upward force on the left side and a downward force on the right side. And that's exactly what we do. In order to calculate the magnitude of that total force applied all across this spindle hole, I take the total moment and divide that by the length of the spindle hole. Or in other words, in order to replace moment with the original derivation, I get the force times the radius of the wheel times the moment load. Then I divide that force in half because I'm applying it over two halves of the spindle. And so I'm actually going to be applying two separate bearing loads in my analysis software, NX, later. And so in order to get accuracy, I'm going to divide that in half and apply half of it on the left side and half of it on the right side. All right, let's go over into NX, and I'm going to speed through the first portion of this, guys, because we already know how to do this. I'm going to stop right here really quick to go over one thing that's really important. If I'm going to apply two different bearing loads, one to each half of this spindle hole here, I'm going to need to split that body in half to do so. So right here, before I click on New Fem and Simulation, I need to click Split Body Command. That's going to open up this dialog, and I select the body, which of course is the upright, and I'm going to make sure this is New Plane and Bisector. I'm going to open the plane dialog, and I select the first planar object, which is the close end of the spindle hole, and then I select the second planar object, which is the far end. And sure enough, that's the one I want. And it knows, because I've got bisector selected, the mid plane is the plane that I want to split the body along. So I click OK, and OK again. And if you did that right, you should see a nice line going all the way down and completely splitting the upright in half along the spindle hole. The next thing is just like you remember it, New Fem and Simulation. I click OK. And then when this comes up, I will name this cornering. That's the type of solution that I'm going to be running. Okay. And now I'm ready to mesh. Just as before, I'm going to hit 3D tetrahedral mesh. And my element size, 2 millimeters. That's great. C tetra 10 is fantastic. And create a new one, just like always. It is aluminum 6061. And there you are, aluminum 6061. I click OK. And I click OK, and I call it, instead of solid 1, aluminum 6061. Click OK. And now, one thing I need to be careful of is that because I split the body into two bodies, I need to select both of them individually. And then click OK. It'll take a little while, about twice as long to mesh, because it's got two different bodies that it has to mesh. Now, one thing that's really important, right now, after I split the body, I have not yet told NX that those two bodies are actually connected, and that all I'm doing that for is for force distribution. So after this is done, I need to mold them back together such that one can't move relative to the other. I'll show you how to do that in a sec. My goodness, that is a fine mesh. That might have been a little bit too small. Okay, yeah. We don't need it 2 millimeters. I'm going to edit this video and call it good. Okay, this should be easier. Great. Now, I have done this, but before I activate my simulation, what I need to do first is make sure NX knows that those two solid bodies are actually one solid body that I can apply different forces to different sides of. So how I'm going to do that is under here, behind element quality, there's a little box called More, and I click on that. And I scroll down here to Duplicate Nodes. I'm going to select both objects. And note, with a tolerance of 0.001 millimeters, it thinks that all of these blue nodes are duplicates of each other. And if I click Merge Nodes, it's going to make all of those nodes just one. What that effectively does is welds our two sides together, but only at those points. So, if I look at this more closely, this isn't super satisfactory to me. I don't have very much along the bottom here that's going to be welded together, and thus I don't think this is an accurate model. So I'm going to adjust my tolerance upward by a factor of 10, and it's still not working too well for me, so I'm going to do it one more time, and one more time. And that looks much better. With a tolerance of 1 millimeter, I adjusted the mesh size to 7 millimeters, by the way. With a mesh size of 1 millimeter, it looks like I'm going to get a well-glued together two split bodies here, and that's okay. If you notice, where I expect to see the most displacement is down here, which is why I cared so much. If I was a little bit spotty up here, that would be okay. It's not a huge deal. It's just something to keep an eye out for to make sure your model is nice and accurate. So now that I've found a tolerance that I like, I'm going to click Merge Nodes. It'll take a little while. And to make sure that everything worked out well, I'm going to go ahead and close this and click on Element Quality. I select all of the objects that I'm working with and click Check Elements. And it has 46 failed elements, which means that my tolerance was, in fact, too high. So in order to fix that, I need to undo what I just did, undo the merging of duplicate nodes, and do it again. Duplicate nodes, click on the two objects. I will adjust this to 0.5 and try that instead. Again, element quality, just to check. Click on my two bodies, check elements. Only one failed element left, so I don't have much more to do. Again, I undo. More, duplicate nodes, click, click. Change this to 0.2. Oh, it didn't select the other object. Sorry, change it to 0.2. Still looks okay, because down on the bottom is where I'm most worried. And merge nodes. Element quality, click, click. Check elements. And no more failed elements. I don't have to worry too much about the warning elements. Just keep it in mind for later, just in case something goes wrong. Maybe ask someone who's done this before to help you. Go ahead and click close. And now we are ready to go to our simulation. So click activate simulation. The first thing I noted in the video was that I'm going to pin constrain everywhere where the A arms connect to the upright. Pin constraints are going to go right there in that hole, right there in that hole, and in both of these two holes. That hole, that hole, that hole, that hole. Now I've selected everything. Oh, almost forgot these two guys. Not super important because they're not going to see a whole lot of loading, but it's a good thing to keep the model accurate. And now I click OK, and everything is pinned perfectly. Now I apply my forces. The first thing I said was I have a reaction force right here. So I divide that reaction force by 2 and apply it to both of these spaces in here. And these are not realistic numbers, so make sure you calculate these numbers for yourself. I'm just taking numbers off the top of my head. Specify vector. This is very important. Make sure in the free body diagram you picked that if I'm going to be cornering, if I'm driving into the page, if I'm driving this into the page and then I make a hard corner, and I said that it was going to be along the positive x-axis, that's where it's going to be. And sure enough, you can see the little force arrows. And then in order to apply a moment load to these, like bearing load, and the first one I'm going to do on this face. I think I said that I was facing down on the outward face and up on the inward face. So I select my vector, point it down after I've selected that face. Here, this is probably going to be a little bit larger, even after I divide it by 2. There's my first bearing load, and my second bearing load is going to be on this side. It is going to be pointing in the opposite direction, the first one. We'll have the same magnitude. I'm going to click OK. And sure enough, there's my loading case right there. All right, and now, again, just like always, I click Solve. OK. I wait for it to run. All right, and we're back. I hit close, cancel, close everything out. I'm done with all of it. And sure enough, here are my beautiful results, and that does look realistic for a cornering force. 1G, actually. Perfect. All right, one thing to keep in mind, guys. So cornering forces you'll find to be relatively easy for doing these simulations, especially with the upright. Same with bump loads. The one thing that may cause you trouble is braking loads, because in our free body diagram that we drew, those braking loads are going to be into the page. So when that happens, keep in mind that some of that moment is going to be resolved inside that spindle hole, but some of that moment is going to be resolved by the braking calipers, which connect here, 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 and here. You'll have to apply braking moment loads along tangent to the circle that holds all of these. Just draw a free body diagram of it in this orientation. You'll be able to see what I mean. But if you have any questions, just feel free to ask somebody who's hanging around. And that is the conclusion of how to analyze suspension components in 3D FEA.